Sarah Martinez wiped down the last table in the executive cafeteria of Apex Aviation Industries. The clock on the wall showed 7:30 p.m., and the massive corporate building was nearly empty. She had been working as a cafeteria worker for 12 years, serving meals to engineers, executives, and occasionally the company's CEO, Victoria Sterling. Sarah never complained about her job, even when the executives treated her like she was invisible. She needed this work to support her family. Her 19-year-old son, Marcus, was waiting for her in the parking lot. He sat in their old Honda Civic, reading a technical manual about aircraft engines. Marcus had always been fascinated by machines and how they worked. When he was little, he would take apart old radios and toasters just to see what was inside. Now he spent his free time studying engineering books from the library and watching online tutorials about aircraft mechanics. Marcus had applied to several engineering programs at local colleges, but the tuition fees were too high for their family budget. Sarah worked double shifts sometimes, but it was never enough. Marcus had started working part-time at an auto repair shop to help with expenses, but his real dream was to work with aircraft engines. He would often pick up his mother from work and listen to her stories about the company's latest projects. Victoria Sterling, the CEO of Apex Aviation, was known throughout the industry as a brilliant but ruthless businesswoman. She had built her company from a small aircraft parts manufacturer into one of the world's leading aviation technology firms. Her company designed and manufactured engines for commercial airlines, military aircraft, and private jets. Victoria was proud of her success and often reminded her employees that she had earned everything through hard work and superior intelligence. That evening, Victoria was working late in her corner office on the 15th floor. She was reviewing reports about a serious problem with their newest jet engine model, the AX9000. 3 engines had failed during test flights, and the company's reputation was at stake. The engineering team had been working on the problem for 6 months, but they couldn't figure out what was causing the failures. The company had already spent $8 million on research and development, and airlines were starting to cancel their orders. Victoria's phone rang. It was her head engineer, Dr. Robert Chen. "We've run every test imaginable," he said, sounding frustrated. "The metal fatigue analysis, stress testing, computer simulations, everything looks perfect on paper, but the engines keep failing at high altitudes." Victoria slammed her hand on her desk. "This is unacceptable, Robert. We have some of the smartest engineers in the world working for us. How can we not solve this problem?" Meanwhile, in the parking lot, Marcus noticed several company vehicles still parked outside. "Long day for the engineers," he told his mother as she got into the car. Sarah nodded. "There's some big problem with one of their engines. I heard Mr. Chen talking about it in the cafeteria today. Something about engines failing during flights." Marcus's eyes lit up with interest. "What kind of engines?" "I think they called it the AX9000 or something like that," Sarah replied. During the drive home, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the engine problem. When they arrived at their small apartment, he immediately went to his computer and started researching the AX9000 engine. He found technical specifications, news articles about the test failures, and even some leaked engineering reports online. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work early as usual. She started preparing breakfast for the employees and noticed that several engineers looked exhausted, as if they had worked all night. Victoria Sterling came into the cafeteria around 8 a.m., looking frustrated and angry. "The board of directors is breathing down my neck," Victoria was telling Dr. Chen as they walked past Sarah's serving station. "If we can't solve this engine problem soon, we're looking at massive lawsuits and possibly bankruptcy." Sarah pretended not to listen, but she heard every word. She felt sorry for the engineers who were working so hard to solve the problem. That evening, she told Marcus about the conversation. "Mom, I've been reading about that engine," Marcus said excitedly. "I think I might know what's wrong with it." Sarah looked at her son with surprise. "Marcus, these are some of the smartest engineers in the world. They have advanced degrees and years of experience. How could you possibly know something they don't?" Marcus pulled out his notebook, which was filled with sketches and calculations. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've been studying the engine design online. I think the problem isn't with the engine itself. It's with how the fuel flows through the system at different altitudes. He showed his mother a diagram he had drawn. Look, the fuel injection system works perfectly at sea level, but when the aircraft reaches high altitude, the air pressure changes affect the fuel mixture. The engineers are looking at the engine components, but they're not considering how atmospheric pressure affects fuel density. Sarah stared at her son's notebook. She didn't understand most of the technical details, but Marcus seemed so confident about his theory. Even if you're right, who would listen to you? You're just a 19-year-old kid without an engineering degree. I know, Marcus said quietly. But what if I am right? What if I could help save the company millions of dollars and maybe even save lives? The next day at work, Sarah couldn't concentrate on her tasks. She kept thinking about Marcus's theory and watching the stressed faces of the engineers. Dr. Chen looked particularly worried as he sat alone at a corner table, staring at a stack of technical reports. During her lunch break, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She approached Dr. Chen's table nervously. "Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to bother you." Dr. Chen looked up, surprised to see the cafeteria worker speaking to him. "Yes? Is there something wrong with the food?" "No, sir. It's about the engine problem. My son has been studying your X9000 engine, and he thinks he might know what's causing the failures." Dr. Chen's expression changed from surprise to irritation. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but we have a team of highly qualified engineers working on this problem. I don't think your son understands the complexity of aircraft engine design." Sarah felt embarrassed but continued. "I know it sounds strange, sir, but Marcus is very smart about machines. He thinks the problem might be with fuel flow at high altitudes." Before Dr. Chen could respond, Victoria Sterling appeared at the table. She had overheard the conversation and looked amused. "Did I just hear correctly? The cafeteria worker's son thinks he can solve our $8 million engineering problem?" The other employees in the cafeteria turned to look. Sarah felt her face burning with embarrassment, but she stood her ground. "My son has studied your engine design extensively. He has some ideas that might help." Victoria laughed coldly. "This is rich. We have engineers with PhDs from MIT and Stanford, and you think your son, who probably didn't even finish high school, can solve what they cannot?" "He graduated high school with honors," Sarah said quietly but firmly. "And he's been accepted to several engineering programs." Victoria's amusement turned to irritation. "Fine. You know what? I'll make you a deal. If your son can actually fix our engine problem, I'll personally pay for his college education and give him a job at this company. But when he fails, and he will fail, you'll stop wasting our time with ridiculous suggestions." The cafeteria fell completely silent. Every employee stopped eating and stared at the dramatic scene unfolding before them. Sarah felt her hands trembling as she realized what had just happened. Victoria Sterling, one of the most powerful women in the aviation industry, had just challenged her teenage son to solve a problem that had stumped dozens of expert engineers. Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable with the situation. "Victoria, perhaps we should—" "No, Robert," Victoria interrupted, her voice cold and commanding. "I want to see this miracle boy in action. When can your son come in?" she asked Sarah directly. Sarah's voice barely came out as a whisper. "He could come tomorrow after school, ma'am." Victoria smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Perfect. Tomorrow at 4 p.m., conference room A. I'll gather the entire engineering team so they can witness this spectacular failure firsthand. Maybe it'll teach everyone here not to waste time on amateur theories." As Victoria walked away, her heels clicking loudly on the cafeteria floor, Sarah sank into the nearest chair. What had she done? She had just set up her son for public humiliation in front of some of the smartest people in the aviation industry. Dr. Chen sat down across from her. "Mrs. Martinez," he said gently, "I think you should know what your son is up against. This engine problem has consumed our best minds for months. We've run computer simulations, wind tunnel tests, material analysis, everything. The failure happens at exactly 35,000 feet every single time. The engine just loses power and shuts down. We've checked every component, every sensor, every line of code in the control system." Sarah nodded sadly. I know it's impossible. My son is so passionate about this stuff and he was so convinced he understood the problem. I thought maybe. I'll tell you what, Dr. Chen said, lowering his voice. Bring your son's notes tomorrow. Even if he's completely wrong, maybe a fresh perspective could spark something. Sometimes breakthrough discoveries come from the most unexpected places. That evening, Sarah drove home in silence. Marcus was waiting, for her with excitement in his eyes. So, did you talk to anyone about my theory? Sarah took a deep breath and explained everything that had happened. Marcus's expression changed from excitement to shock to determination. She challenged me to fix the engine, he asked, his voice serious. Marcus, honey, maybe we should forget about this. These people are experts with decades of experience. I don't want you to be embarrassed or hurt. Marcus walked to his desk and picked up his notebook, which was now filled with even more calculations and diagrams. Mom, I've been working on this all day. I'm more convinced than ever that I'm right about the fuel flow problem. Look at these calculations. He showed his mother pages of complex mathematical equations and detailed sketches of the engine's fuel system. The fuel injection rate is calibrated for sea-level air pressure, but at 35,000 feet, the air is much thinner. The fuel-to-air ratio becomes incorrect, causing incomplete combustion and eventually engine failure. Sarah looked at her son's work. She didn't understand the technical details, but she could see the passion and intelligence in his eyes. Are you sure about this, Marcus? As sure as I can be without actually testing it, Marcus replied. Mom, what if I'm right? What if I can actually help solve this problem? This could change our entire lives. That night, Marcus stayed up until 3 a.m., double-checking his calculations and preparing a presentation. He created simple diagrams that could explain his theory to non-technical people. He also researched similar problems that had occurred in other aircraft engines throughout aviation history. The next day at school, Marcus could barely concentrate on his classes. His teachers noticed that he seemed distracted, but he couldn't explain that he was about to challenge some of the world's top engineers with his theory about jet engine design. Meanwhile, at Apex Aviation, word of the challenge had spread throughout the building. Some employees thought Victoria was being unnecessarily cruel to Sarah and her son. Others were curious to see what the teenager would propose. A few engineers were actually offended that an untrained kid was being given the opportunity to review their work. Victoria spent the morning in meetings with the board of directors. The company's stock price had dropped 12% since news of the engine failures had leaked to the press. 3 major airlines had canceled their orders for aircraft using the X9000 engine, representing a loss of over $50 million in future revenue. Victoria, said board member James Patterson, we need results immediately. The FAA is breathing down our necks and our competitors are circling like vultures. If we can't solve this problem within the next 2 weeks, we'll have to recall all X9000 engines and redesign from scratch. That could bankrupt the company. Victoria's jaw tightened. I understand the stakes, James. My team is working around the clock. Perhaps you should consider bringing in outside consultants, suggested another board member. Maybe Boeing or Rolls-Royce could lend us some expertise. Absolutely not, Victoria snapped. That would be admitting defeat and destroying our reputation permanently. We will solve this problem internally. At 3:45 p.m., Marcus arrived at the Apex Aviation building with his mother. He carried a small backpack containing his notebook, a laptop computer that he had borrowed from his auto shop supervisor, and a thermos of coffee to calm his nerves. Sarah could see that her son was nervous but determined. They took the elevator to the 15th floor where conference room A was located. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see a large table surrounded by at least 20 people in business, suits and lab coats. His stomach tightened with anxiety. Mom, what if I'm completely wrong? What if I make a fool of myself in front of all these people? Sarah squeezed her son's hand. Marcus, you've worked harder on this problem than anyone could expect. Just do your best and tell them what you've discovered. Win or lose, I'm proud of you for trying. Dr. Chen appeared in the hallway. Mrs. Martinez, Marcus, please come with me. As they walked toward the conference room, he whispered to Marcus, Don't let them intimidate you. Just present your ideas clearly and answer their questions honestly. Victoria Sterling stood at the head of the conference table, looking imposing in her tailored black suit. Around the table sat the entire engineering team, several department heads, and even some board members who had stayed to witness the unusual event. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria announced with obvious sarcasm, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Martinez, our 19-year-old consulting engineer. He's going to solve the AX9000 problem that has stumped our entire team for 6 months." Some people in the room chuckled. Others looked uncomfortable with Victoria's mocking tone. Marcus felt his face redden, but he straightened his shoulders and walked to the front of the room. "Thank you for this opportunity," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. He opened his notebook and connected his laptop to the room's projection system. "I know this is unusual, but I'd like to share my analysis of the AX9000 engine failures." Victoria crossed her arms and smiled coldly. "The floor is yours, young man. Show us what our Harvard and MIT graduates have missed." Marcus took a deep breath and clicked to his first slide, which showed a simple diagram of the AX9000 engine. "I've studied all the publicly available information about the engine failures, and I noticed that every failure occurred at exactly 35,000 feet altitude." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's correct. We've documented this pattern extensively." "What I found interesting," Marcus continued, "is that the engineering team has focused primarily on mechanical failures, electrical system problems, and software glitches. But I think the issue is much more fundamental." He clicked to his next slide, which showed a graph of air pressure versus altitude. At sea level, air pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. At 35,000 feet, it drops to about 3.46 psi. That's less than 1/4 of the pressure at sea level. Victoria looked annoyed. "Young man, every engineer in this room understands basic atmospheric pressure. What's your point?" Marcus felt nervous but pressed on. "My point is that the fuel injection system was calibrated for sea-level conditions. The X9000 uses a precise fuel-to-air ratio for optimal combustion. But as the aircraft climbs and air pressure decreases, the fuel injection rate doesn't adjust proportionally." One of the senior engineers, Dr. Angela Foster, leaned forward with interest. "Are you suggesting that the fuel mixture becomes too rich at altitude?" "Not exactly," Marcus replied, clicking to a more detailed technical diagram. "I think the opposite is happening. The fuel injection system maintains the same rate, but because the air is much thinner at 35,000 feet, there's actually less oxygen available for combustion. The mixture becomes too lean, causing incomplete fuel burn and eventually engine failure." The room fell silent. Several engineers exchanged glances. Dr. Chen pulled out his tablet and began running quick calculations. After a few moments, he looked up with surprise. "Marcus, your theory about oxygen availability is interesting, but our fuel management system is designed to adjust for altitude changes automatically." Marcus nodded. "I know, sir. But I think there might be a timing issue with the adjustment mechanism. Look at this." He showed a chart he had created comparing the engine's fuel adjustment response time with the rapid altitude changes during typical commercial flight patterns. Modern aircraft can climb very quickly. The AX9000's fuel management system has a response delay of approximately 2.3 seconds when adjusting to pressure changes. During rapid ascent, the engine experiences a brief period where the fuel mixture is incorrect. Dr. Foster sat up straighter. "That's an incredibly small window. Are you saying that a 2.3-second delay could cause complete engine failure?" "Not immediately," Marcus explained. "But if this happens repeatedly during ascent, it creates cumulative stress on the engine components. The incomplete combustion causes excessive heat in the combustion chamber, leading to metal fatigue over time." Victoria's expression had changed, from mockery to skepticism. "Even if your theory is correct, our engines undergo extensive testing before installation. We would have caught this problem during development." Marcus clicked to his final slide, which showed data about different testing protocols. "I researched your testing procedures. Most ground tests and even flight tests use gradual controlled ascent patterns. But in real-world commercial flying, pilots often use much more aggressive climb rates to save fuel and time. The rapid ascent that causes the problem isn't replicated in your test flights. The room was completely quiet now. Dr. Chen was typing, rapidly on his tablet, running complex calculations. After several minutes, he looked up with an expression of amazement. "I've run the numbers based on Marcus's theory," he announced. "If the fuel mixture timing is off by even a fraction during rapid ascent, it could indeed cause the cumulative damage he's describing." Dr. Foster nodded slowly. "It would also explain why the failures happen consistently at 35,000 feet. That's where most commercial flights level off after their steepest climb phase." Victoria's face had gone pale. She stared at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and growing alarm. "Are you telling me that this child has identified a problem that 20 of my best engineers missed?" Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Victoria, his theory needs to be tested, but it's mathematically sound. We never considered the interaction between rapid altitude changes and fuel mixture timing, because our test protocols don't replicate real-world ascent patterns." Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror. "There's more," he said quietly. "If I'm right about the cause, I think I know how to fix it." Every person in the room leaned forward. Victoria gripped the edge of the table. "What kind of fix?" Marcus pulled out a hand-drawn schematic. "The fuel management system needs a predictive algorithm instead of a reactive one. Instead of responding to pressure changes after they happen, the system should anticipate altitude changes based on aircraft trajectory and adjust the fuel mixture in advance." Dr. Foster studied the diagram. "A predictive system? That's actually brilliant. The aircraft's navigation computer already knows the planned altitude changes. We could integrate that data with fuel management." "How difficult would this be to implement?" Victoria asked, her voice tight. Dr. Chen was already making notes. "The hardware wouldn't need to change. It's primarily a software modification to the engine control unit. We'd need to integrate with the aircraft's flight management system, but that's absolutely doable." "How long would it take?" Victoria pressed. "If Marcus's theory is correct, we could have a prototype software update ready for testing within 2 weeks," Dr. Chen replied. Victoria stood up abruptly and began pacing around the room. Everyone watched her in silence. Finally, she stopped and stared directly at Marcus. "Young man, do you have any idea what you've just done?" Marcus wasn't sure if she was angry or impressed. "I hope I've helped solve your problem, ma'am. If your theory proves correct," Victoria said slowly, "you will have saved this company from bankruptcy. You will have potentially saved lives by preventing future engine failures. And you will have accomplished what millions of dollars in engineering expertise could not." She paused and looked around the room at her engineering team. "But you will also have demonstrated that our entire development and testing process is fundamentally flawed. You've shown that a teenager with library books and internet access can outsmart our PhD-level engineers." The tension in the room was palpable. Some engineers looked embarrassed. Others appeared fascinated by Marcus's presentation. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly in the back corner, watched her son with amazement and pride. Dr. Foster spoke up. "Victoria, sometimes breakthrough insights come from outside perspectives. Marcus approached this problem without the assumptions and blind spots that we developed over years of working with these systems." "That's exactly my point," Victoria said sharply. "Our assumptions nearly destroyed this company. If this theory is correct, we need to completely overhaul how we approach engineering problems." She turned back to Marcus. "I made you a promise. If you could fix our engine problem, I would pay for your education and give you a job. I'm a woman of my word. But first, we need to test your theory thoroughly." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Victoria looked at Dr. Chen. "Robert, I want a full test program designed around Marcus's theory. Use aggressive ascent patterns that replicate real-world commercial flying. I want results within 1 week." "Understood," Dr. Chen replied. Victoria gathered her papers and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back to Marcus. "Young man, you may have just saved my company, but you've also created the biggest crisis of my career. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Over the next week, Apex Aviation transformed into a hub of intense activity. Dr. Chen assembled a specialized testing team to validate Marcus's theory, while the software engineering department began developing the predictive fuel management system that Marcus had proposed. Word of the teenager's presentation had spread throughout the company, creating a mixture of excitement and controversy among the employees. Marcus found himself in an unprecedented position. Victoria had granted him full access to the engineering facilities and assigned him a temporary security badge. Every morning after school, he would rush to the Apex Aviation building to work alongside the professional engineers. Some welcomed his fresh perspective, while others remained skeptical of his involvement. Dr. Foster became Marcus's primary mentor during this period. She was impressed by his intuitive understanding of complex systems and his ability to see problems from unique angles. "Marcus," she told him one afternoon as they reviewed test data, "you have a natural gift for engineering. But more importantly, you're not afraid to question established assumptions." The testing process was rigorous and nerve-wracking. The team used sophisticated flight simulators to replicate the exact conditions that had caused the previous engine failures. They programmed different ascent rates, altitude patterns, and environmental conditions to see if Marcus's theory held up under various scenarios. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her work in the cafeteria, but everything had changed for her. Some employees treated her with newfound respect, asking about her son's progress. Others seemed resentful, as if Marcus's success somehow diminished their own accomplishments. The attention made Sarah uncomfortable, but she was proud of her son's determination. Victoria spent most of her time in emergency meetings with the board of directors, airline customers, and federal aviation officials. The company's reputation hung in the balance, and every day without a solution meant millions of dollars in continued losses. She found herself in the unusual position of hoping that a 19-year-old's theory would save her life's work. On Thursday of that week, Dr. Chen called Marcus into the main testing laboratory. The room was filled with computer screens, engine components, and sophisticated monitoring equipment. A group of engineers stood around a large monitor displaying real-time engine performance data. "Marcus, we've completed the initial tests of your theory," Dr. Chen announced. "I think you should see the results." The screen showed two side-by-side comparisons of engine performance. The left side displayed the traditional fuel management system during rapid ascent. The right side showed the same scenario using Marcus's predictive fuel mixture adjustment. "Look at these temperature readings," Dr. Foster pointed to the data. "With the original system, combustion chamber temperatures spiked dramatically during altitude changes. But with your predictive system, the temperatures remained stable throughout the entire ascent." Marcus stared at the data with amazement. His theory wasn't just correct, it was dramatically effective. So the engine failures were really caused by the fuel mixture timing? "Without question," Dr. Chen confirmed. "We've run the test 50 times with different flight patterns. The original system fails consistently at high altitudes during rapid ascent. Your predictive system prevents the problem completely." Word of the successful tests reached Victoria within minutes. She immediately called an emergency meeting with the entire engineering team, key executives, and board members. This time, when Marcus entered the conference room, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of skepticism and mockery, he saw faces filled with respect and gratitude. Victoria stood at the head of the table, but her demeanor had changed dramatically. The arrogance and condescension were gone, replaced by something that looked like humility. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I need to make several announcements. First, Marcus Martinez's theory has been proven correct through extensive testing. The X9000 engine failures were indeed caused by fuel mixture timing issues during rapid altitude changes." A murmur of amazement rippled through the room. "Second," Victoria continued, "the software fix based on Marcus's design is ready for implementation. We can retrofit existing engines with a simple software update, and all future engines will include the predictive fuel management system as standard." The relief in the room was palpable. Several engineers applauded spontaneously. "Third," Victoria said, her voice becoming more serious, "this discovery has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about our company and my leadership." She looked directly at Marcus. A teenager with no formal engineering education identified and solved a problem that stumped our entire professional team. This wasn't luck or coincidence. It was the result of fresh thinking, careful analysis, and the courage to challenge established assumptions. Victoria paused and looked around the room. Which brings me to my fourth announcement. Effective immediately, I am implementing major changes to our engineering and testing procedures. We will actively seek outside perspectives on all future projects. We will test our engines under real-world conditions, not just controlled laboratory scenarios. And we will create an environment where anyone, regardless of age, education, or position, can contribute ideas. She turned back to Marcus. Young man, I owe you an apology. When your mother first suggested that you might have insights about our engine problem, I dismissed the idea with arrogance and contempt. I nearly let my prejudices prevent us from finding the solution that saved this company. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the praise, but also uncomfortable with the attention. Ma'am, I just happened to look at the problem from a different angle. Your engineers did all the hard work of testing and implementation. Victoria smiled, and, for the first time, it seemed genuine. That's exactly the kind of humility and teamwork we need more of around here. She opened a folder on the table. Now, about my promise. I said I would pay for your education and offer you a job if you solved our problem. I'm prepared to do much more than that. Marcus's eyes widened as Victoria pulled out several official documents. First, Apex Aviation will establish the Martinez Engineering Scholarship, providing full college funding for you and 9 other students annually who demonstrate exceptional problem-solving abilities, regardless of their formal qualifications. Sarah gasped from her seat in the back of the room. This was beyond anything she had ever imagined for her son. Second, Victoria continued, I'm offering you a position as a junior engineering consultant, starting immediately. You'll work part-time, while completing your education with full-time employment guaranteed after graduation. Marcus struggled to find words. I don't know what to say, ma'am. Say yes, Victoria replied. But there's more. I'm also promoting your mother, Sarah, to Director of Employee Relations. Her courage in speaking up about your ideas despite the risk of embarrassment or ridicule demonstrates the kind of leadership we need in management. The room erupted in applause. Sarah began crying, overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of their lives. Victoria raised her hand for silence. Finally, I want everyone in this company to understand something important. Innovation doesn't come from credentials or experience alone. It comes from curiosity, determination, and the willingness to see problems differently. Marcus Martinez has reminded us that breakthrough discoveries can come from anywhere, at any time, from anyone with the courage to think independently. Dr. Chen stood up. Victoria, if I may, I think Marcus has also taught us the importance of listening to unconventional ideas rather than dismissing them. His success is as much about our willingness to consider his theory as it is about the theory itself. Absolutely correct, Robert, Victoria agreed. And that's why I'm implementing an open innovation policy. Any employee, contractor, or even family member can submit technical suggestions directly to the engineering team. Every idea will be evaluated on its merits, not on who proposed it. As the meeting concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by engineers eager to discuss his ideas and welcome him to the team. Sarah was embraced by colleagues who had previously barely acknowledged her existence. But as the celebration continued, Victoria pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. Her expression became serious again. Marcus, I want you to understand something. What you've accomplished here is remarkable, but it's also dangerous for someone your age. Marcus looked confused. Dangerous? How? Victoria glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Success like this can make people expect miracles from you constantly. The press will want interviews. Competitors will try to recruit you. Some people will resent your achievements. You need to be prepared for challenges that have nothing to do with engineering. Marcus nodded slowly. I just want to learn and help solve problems. I know, Victoria said, and I'll do everything I can to protect you from the politics and pressure. But I also need you to know that your discovery here has implications far beyond our company. You've exposed flaws in industry-wide testing standards and engineering, practices. That's going to create waves throughout the entire aviation industry. Victoria's warning proved prophetic within days of the announcement. News of Marcus's discovery spread rapidly through the aviation industry, creating shockwaves that reached far beyond Apex Aviation. Trade publications, engineering journals, and major newspapers picked up the story of the teenager who had solved an $8 million engineering problem that had stumped industry experts. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately launched an investigation into industry-wide testing standards. If Marcus's theory was correct about the AX9000 engine, similar problems might exist in other aircraft engines that used comparable fuel management systems. This possibility sent tremors through every major aerospace company in the world. Boeing, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, and General Electric all scrambled to review their own engine designs and testing protocols. Stock prices fluctuated wildly as investors worried about potential widespread engine recalls and safety issues. The story became front-page news when the FAA announced that they were temporarily grounding all aircraft using similar fuel management systems pending comprehensive safety reviews. Marcus found himself at the center of an international controversy that he never anticipated. Reporters camped outside his apartment building, trying to get interviews. Engineering professors from prestigious universities called to discuss his theories. Competing aerospace companies attempted to recruit him with lucrative offers. The pressure was overwhelming for a 19-year-old who had simply wanted to help solve a technical problem. Marcus struggled to balance his new responsibilities at Apex Aviation with media attention, college applications, and the normal challenges of being a teenager. Sarah watched her son with growing concern as the stress began affecting his sleep and appetite. Victoria recognized the problem and took decisive action. She hired a public relations firm to manage Marcus's media appearances and established strict protocols for protecting him from excessive pressure. She also assigned Dr. Foster as his full-time mentor to ensure he continued learning, rather than becoming overwhelmed by fame. Marcus, Victoria told him during one of their private meetings, "I've been thinking about what happens next. Your discovery has made you famous in the engineering world, but fame can be a trap if you're not careful." Marcus looked tired from weeks of interviews and technical presentations. "Sometimes I wish I had never said anything about the engine. My life was simpler before all this attention." Victoria nodded understandingly. "I felt the same way when I first became successful, but you can't go backward, and you shouldn't want to. What you can do is decide how to use your opportunities wisely." She pulled out a detailed plan she had been developing. "I've been working with several universities to create a unique education path for you. Instead of traditional college, you would split time between academic study and hands-on engineering work. You'd graduate with both a degree and years of practical experience." Marcus studied the proposal with interest. "This looks like it would let me keep working on real engineering problems while still getting my education." "Exactly," Victoria confirmed. "And it would also give you time to develop your own ideas without the pressure of constant media attention. We could establish a research lab specifically for your projects." However, not everyone was pleased with Marcus's success and the changes it had brought to the industry. 3 weeks after the initial discovery, Victoria received a disturbing phone call from her head of security. "Ma'am, we've intercepted some concerning communications," the security chief reported. "Several of our competitors are questioning the validity of Marcus's solution. They're suggesting that we fabricated the entire story to cover up more serious engineering flaws." Victoria's expression darkened. "Do they have any evidence to support these accusations?" "No concrete evidence, but they're demanding independent verification of all our test results. They've also hired private investigators to look into Marcus's background, trying to find anything that might discredit him." This news infuriated Victoria. The idea that competitors would attack a teenager's credibility rather than admit their own testing inadequacies revealed the worst aspects of corporate politics. She immediately called an emergency meeting with her legal team and public relations advisors. "We're going to be completely transparent," Victoria announced to the assembled group. "I want every piece of test data, every calculation, and every result made available for independent review. If our competitors want to challenge Marcus's work, They'll have to do it with facts, not innuendo. Meanwhile, Marcus was facing his own challenges. Some of his former classmates had become resentful of his sudden fame and success. Comments on social media ranged from supportive to cruel, with some people claiming he was just lucky or that his mother had somehow cheated to get him the opportunity. The stress was taking its toll on the entire Martinez family. Sarah had been promoted to Director of Employee Relations, but she struggled with imposter syndrome, feeling like she didn't deserve her new position. Some longtime employees questioned whether her promotion was merit-based or simply a reward for her son's achievement. Dr. Foster noticed Marcus's declining enthusiasm during their work sessions. "Marcus, you seem distracted lately. Is everything okay?" Marcus sighed deeply. "Dr. Foster, I used to love working on engineering problems because they were clean and logical. You could solve them with math and physics. But now everything is complicated by politics and personalities. People are questioning my motives, my abilities, even my honesty." Dr. Foster sat down beside him. "Marcus, let me tell you something I learned early in my career. When you challenge established systems, there will always be people who attack you personally rather than engage with your ideas. It's easier to discredit the messenger than to admit they were wrong." She pulled out a historical engineering journal. "Look at this article about the engineer who invented anti-lock brakes. When he first proposed the idea, automotive executives called him crazy and suggested he didn't understand how cars worked. Now anti-lock brakes are standard in every vehicle." Marcus studied the article with interest. "So this kind of resistance is normal?" "Unfortunately, yes," Dr. Foster confirmed. "But here's the important part. He kept working on his idea because he knew it was right, regardless of what critics said. That's what you need to do." Their conversation was interrupted by Victoria, who entered the lab looking agitated. "Marcus, Dr. Foster, we have a situation. Our primary competitor, Titan Aerospace, has just announced that they've identified fundamental flaws in our engine fix. They're claiming that our solution creates new safety risks." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Are they right? Could our fix cause other problems?" Victoria's expression was grim. "They're demanding a public demonstration of our solution, with independent observers and media present. They want to prove that our fix doesn't work or that it creates new dangers." "Doctor," Foster looked concerned. "Victoria, this sounds like a setup. They could manipulate the test conditions to make our solution appear faulty." "I'm aware of that risk," Victoria replied. "But if we refuse their challenge, it will look like we're hiding something. The FAA is already under pressure to extend the aircraft grounding until this dispute is resolved." Marcus stood up suddenly. "I'll do it." Both women looked at him with surprise. "Marcus, you don't understand the implications," Victoria said. "If this demonstration fails, it won't just hurt our company. It will destroy your reputation and credibility. You're still a teenager. You have your entire career ahead of you." Marcus's jaw tightened with determination. "Mrs. Sterling, 3 months ago you challenged me to solve your engine problem. I wasn't afraid then because I knew I was right. I'm not afraid now for the same reason." He walked to the whiteboard and began drawing diagrams. "Our solution works because it's based on fundamental physics and mathematics. Their criticism is based on corporate competition and politics. Let them bring their independent observers and media. Let them test our fix under any conditions they want." Dr. Foster smiled with admiration. "Marcus, that's exactly the kind of confidence and scientific integrity that real engineers need." Victoria studied Marcus's determined expression. She realized that the shy teenager who had first entered her conference room had grown into a confident, young engineer who understood both the technical and political challenges of his profession. "All right," Victoria decided. "We'll accept their challenge, but we're going to do this right. We'll invite not just Titan Aerospace, but every major aviation company, university engineering department, and regulatory agency. If they want a public demonstration, we'll give them one that settles this issue once and for all." Marcus nodded firmly. "When do we start preparing?" Victoria smiled, remembering her first impression of this remarkable young man. "Marcus, I think you've already been preparing for this your entire life. Now let's show the world what real engineering looks like." The public demonstration was scheduled for exactly 1 month later at the Nevada Test and Training Range, a federal facility used for aerospace testing. Victoria had accepted Titan Aerospace's challenge, but she had also expanded it into the most comprehensive engine testing event in aviation history. Representatives from Boeing, Airbus, the FAA, NASA, and engineering departments from 20 major universities would witness the test. Marcus spent the month preparing with an intensity that amazed everyone around him. He worked 18-hour days, triple-checking every calculation, reviewing every line of code in the predictive fuel management system, and running countless computer simulations. Dr. Foster worried that he was pushing himself too hard, but Marcus insisted that perfection was the only acceptable outcome. Sarah watched her son with a mixture of pride and concern. The confident teenager who had solved the original engine problem had evolved into a focused young engineer who understood that his entire future depended on this single demonstration. She had never seen him so determined or so stressed. Victoria found herself in the unusual position of having her company's fate rest in the hands of a 19-year-old. The board of directors had initially questioned her decision to accept the public challenge, but they ultimately supported her because they had no choice. If Marcus's solution failed publicly, Apex Aviation would be finished. But if they had refused the test, their credibility would have been destroyed anyway. Titan Aerospace had spent the month preparing their own presentation. Their CEO, Richard Blackstone, was a ruthless competitor who had been trying to destroy Apex Aviation for years. He saw the public demonstration as his opportunity to finally achieve that goal while simultaneously discrediting the teenager, whose discovery had threatened the entire industry's testing standards. Blackstone had assembled a team of his best engineers to identify flaws in Marcus's solution. They had also hired a public relations firm to ensure maximum media coverage of what they expected to be Marcus's public failure. The aviation industry buzzed with speculation about the upcoming confrontation. On the morning of the test, Marcus arrived at the Nevada facility with his parents, Victoria, and the core Apex aviation team. The testing site was filled with mobile laboratories, monitoring equipment, and representatives from dozens of companies and organizations. A full-scale AX9000 engine had been mounted on a specialized test stand that could simulate actual flight conditions. Richard Blackstone approached Victoria with a confident smile. "Victoria, I appreciate you accepting our challenge. I think today will be very educational for everyone involved." Victoria's expression was cool and professional. "Richard, I'm sure it will be. Truth has a way of revealing itself when subjected to rigorous testing." Marcus was introduced to the assembled crowd of observers, which included some of the most respected engineers in the world. He felt nervous but focused as he began explaining his theory and the solution he had developed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice clear and steady. "The AX9000 engine failures were caused by a timing mismatch between altitude changes and fuel mixture adjustments. During rapid ascent, the fuel management system couldn't adjust quickly enough to maintain optimal combustion, leading to cumulative damage over time." He walked to the test engine and pointed to specific components. "Our solution uses predictive algorithms that anticipate altitude changes and adjust fuel mixture proactively, rather than reactively. This prevents the combustion irregularities that caused the original failures." Dr. Sarah Chen from MIT, one of the independent observers, raised her hand. "Marcus, can you explain how your system handles unexpected altitude changes that aren't part of the planned flight path?" Marcus nodded confidently. "The system includes adaptive algorithms that respond to sudden altitude changes within 0.3 seconds, which is fast enough to prevent combustion problems even during emergency maneuvers." Richard Blackstone stepped forward with a skeptical expression. "That sounds impressive in theory, but I have concerns about the practical implementation. Our analysis suggests that your predictive system could actually create new failure modes during complex flight scenarios." "What kind of failure modes?" Marcus asked directly. Blackstone smiled coldly. "Engine surge, flame out during rapid descent, and potential system conflicts with existing aircraft safety protocols." Marcus had anticipated these criticisms. Mr. Blackstone, we've tested all of those scenarios extensively. Would you like to see the data? I'd prefer to see the system fail under real conditions, Blackstone replied, which is exactly what I expect to happen today. The formal testing began with baseline measurements of the original AX9000 engine performance. The test stand simulated a commercial aircraft ascending from sea level to 40,000 feet, using the aggressive climb profile that had caused the original failures. As expected, the unmodified engine showed the combustion irregularities and temperature spikes that Marcus had identified. The independent observers could clearly see the problems developing in real time on the monitoring equipment. Next, the same test was run using Marcus's predictive fuel management system. The difference was dramatic and immediate. Combustion remained stable throughout the entire ascent. Temperatures stayed within normal ranges, and all engine parameters remained optimal. Dr. Chen from MIT was visibly impressed. Marcus, this is remarkable. The improvement is not just statistically significant, it's transformational. But Blackstone wasn't finished. This is a controlled test scenario. Let's see what happens when we introduce real-world complications. He had arranged for a series of challenging test scenarios that went far beyond normal flight conditions. The engine was subjected to rapid altitude changes, emergency descent procedures, and complex flight patterns that would stress any fuel management system. Marcus's solution handled every challenge flawlessly. The predictive algorithms adapted to each scenario, maintaining optimal engine performance regardless of the flight profile complexity. As the testing continued, it became clear that Marcus hadn't just solved the original problem. He had created a fuel management system that was superior to anything previously developed. The independent observers began asking detailed technical questions about implementing similar systems in their own engines. Blackstone's confident expression gradually changed to frustration, and then to barely concealed anger. His plan to discredit Marcus was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of exposing flaws, the public demonstration was proving that the teenager had achieved a genuine breakthrough in aerospace engineering. The final test involved running the engine continuously for 6 hours under varying conditions to simulate extended flight operations. Throughout the entire test period, Marcus's system maintained perfect engine performance while the original system would have failed multiple times. When the testing concluded, Dr. Chen addressed the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been working in aerospace engineering for 30 years, and I can state without reservation that what we've witnessed today represents a significant advancement in aircraft engine technology. She turned to Marcus. Young man, your solution doesn't just fix the AX9000 problem, it establishes a new standard for fuel management systems across the entire industry. Richard Blackstone made one final attempt to salvage his position. This demonstration proves nothing about long-term reliability. We won't know if this system is truly safe until it's been in service for years. Victoria stepped forward with a document in her hand. Richard, I'm glad you mentioned long-term reliability. I have something that might interest you. She handed him an official report. This is certification from the FAA approving Marcus's fuel management system for immediate implementation in all AX9000 engines. We've also received preliminary approval to retrofit the system in engines from other manufacturers. Blackstone stared at the document in shock. How is this possible? The certification process takes years. It takes years when you're following traditional development paths, Victoria replied. But when you have a solution that demonstrably improves safety and performance, and when you have independent validation from multiple sources, the FAA can expedite approval in the interest of public safety. Marcus found himself surrounded by engineers, executives, and reporters, all wanting to discuss his achievement and its implications. But he noticed his mother standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, tears of pride in her eyes. He walked over to Sarah and hugged her tightly. Mom, we did it. Sarah smiled through her tears. No, honey, you did it. I just believed in you. Victoria approached them with a satisfied expression. Marcus, I think it's time we discussed your future. This demonstration has proven that you're not just a talented teenager with a good idea. You're a genuine innovator who can change the aerospace industry. She handed him another document. This is a partnership proposal. Instead of just working for Apex Aviation, I'd like you to establish your own research and development company. We'll provide funding, facilities, and support, but you'll have complete freedom to pursue whatever engineering challenges interest you. Marcus stared at the proposal with amazement. 6 months earlier, he had been a community college student working part-time at an auto repair shop. Now he was being offered the opportunity to run his own aerospace research company. Mrs. Sterling, this is incredible, but I still have so much to learn. I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of responsibility. Victoria smiled. Marcus, leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about asking the right questions and having the courage to challenge assumptions. You've already proven you have those qualities. She looked around at the crowd of industry professionals who were still discussing the implications of the day's demonstration. What you accomplished here today will change how the entire aviation industry approaches engineering problems. You've shown that innovation comes from curiosity and determination, not just credentials and experience. Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Victoria. I accept your offer, but with one condition. What's that? Victoria asked. I want to establish a program that gives opportunities to other young people who have good ideas, but lack traditional qualifications. If we're going to change how the industry works, we need to make sure that the next Marcus Martinez doesn't have to wait tables in a cafeteria to get noticed. Victoria extended her hand with genuine respect. Mr. Martinez, I think that's exactly the kind of leadership this industry needs. As they shook hands, Marcus realized that his journey was just beginning. The cafeteria worker's son who had challenged an industry's assumptions had become a young leader with the power to reshape aerospace engineering. But more importantly, he had proven that innovation and determination could overcome any barrier, and that sometimes the most powerful revelations come from the most unexpected sources.